Hello, welcome back. Today, I want to actually a fairly quick video on odds. This is related to probabilities. So this video is meant to be sort of a complement to other videos on probabilities. Hopefully you've seen those. If not, you also want to watch those probably first for actually watch this. So then for odds, our goal is to understand how odds are related to probability and then be able to find the odds in favor or the odds against some event or something happening. Okay, so we talk about odds. You've probably heard odds people talk about, especially in sports, the odds of a team winning or the odds of a team not winning, or maybe the odds of someone winning an award like the Heisman Trophy, something like that. So they're related to probabilities. Let's discuss how that is. So let's say the odds of some event E, either for or against, is a comparison of the probability of event E, the probability of its complement E prime. Okay, so remember a complement of an event is if event E happen, either event E or its complement have to happen. Okay, in terms of probability, if we call PE the probability of event E, then its complement is 1 minus that. So either event E or event E complement will happen, or the complement of E will happen. It's like either it's going to rain. If the probability of it's raining, then the probability is, say if the probability if it will rain is 20%, then probably it won't rain is 80%. But so that the probability that it will or won't rain is 100%. Either one of those is going to happen. So it's a basic way of comparing the probability of event E to its complement. And so odds are expressed either as a ratio, either as a ratio or fraction. Okay, often stated as the probability of E to the probability of E complement, or as a fraction like this. Okay, and it could be either one can be on top, E the probability of E or the probability of E complement, as we'll see. Okay, so quickly, this is a good way to think about it. Think about kind of the way probabilities are stated. So if there are impossible outcomes for event E, impossible outcomes, impossible ways that E can happen, and impossible outcomes for the complement E prime, then basically remember the probability of event E is the number of ways, probably number of ways E can happen over the total number of outcomes, n plus n. Remember, n is the number of ways the event itself can happen. N is the number of ways the complement can happen. So add those together, and basically those are the possible number of outcomes that can happen. So if the probability of E is the number of ways E can happen over the total, then the probability of its complement of the number of ways N can happen over its total. So we'd say that the odds in favor of an event are basically, if you divide both the probabilities, then it's going to be M divided by N, the probability in favor, or we say M to N. Okay, often it's stated this way. Or odds against is basically its complement. The odds against event E are basically its complement on top, so just the reciprocal of this, N over M or N to N. Okay, so several words there, but let's kind of do some examples to make sense of this. Okay, so number one, let's say you're going to flip 2 fair coins. Okay, now I'm going to flip 2 fair coins. Let's think about the sample space of that happening. Okay, so we flip 2 fair coins. What we can have, or we can have 2 heads. It's also the same as flipping 1 fair coin twice. We can have 2 tails, or we can also have heads on the first, tails on the second, or tails on the first, heads on the second. But there are 4 possibilities. Okay, these 4. So that's your sample space for flipping 2 fair coins, or once again, the same as flipping 1 fair coin twice. Okay. Now, let's say our event E is going to be getting 2 tails. Okay, so E then is going to be just getting 2 tails. Okay, we kind of write a set notation like this if we like. All right, so then if we think about E complement, then is basically not getting 2 tails or anything else, everything else that can't happen. Okay, so if I don't get 2 tails, the other possibilities for that are the other 3. So we can get 2 heads, we can get a head in the first, tail in the second, or a tail in the first, head on the second. Okay, those are other possibilities. So that's event E, and this is event E complement. Okay, now also I should mention this is our sample space. So and also each one of these turns out to be equally likely. Okay, let me also say so the probability also the probability of a head getting a head, it's a fair coin equals the probability of getting a tail, which is equal to 1/2 or 0.5. So because of that, all events in the sample space are equally likely. Okay, so the probability of all events in the sample space in that case are equally likely because it's a fair coin. If it wasn't a fair coin, then, for example, probably getting two heads could be different than probably getting two tails. Okay, so let's think about that, what that implies. So the probability of E, event E, we said the probability of getting a tail, then a tail, then. So go back to our sample space. We have we have four events in our sample space, or four outcomes, possible outcomes in our sample space. If each one is equally likely, then probably getting a tail and then a tail is 1/4. And so the probability of not getting a tail, everything else can happen. Probability of not, you can say it's probably not tail then tail. Also, you can say the probability of getting two heads, or a head then a tail, or a tail then a head is equal to 3/4. Okay, because once again, if we add these probabilities together, they must give us 1. Remember, that's what it means to be a complement. Okay, so let's think about the odds. So the odds in favor of two tails. Okay, so let's go back over here to the left. And what that says is where we're going to do that is basically do the ratio of the probability of two tails to the probability of not two tails, not T and T. Okay, and so that's going to be 1/4 divided by 3/4. And so, since if you divide that, the fourths cancel out, you have basically 1/3. Okay, or sometimes written as 1/2/3, or sometimes written as 1/3. So basically odds in favor. Okay, and so this means once again odds in favor this way. So think about number of chances. You have one chance out of 4 of getting a tail. Okay, so that's the odds in favor. As you can see, that means, of course, it's 1, 2, 3. This is a smaller number in front. That means in terms of in favor, that means less of a chance of getting two tails than getting something else. And so also if we do odds against that of two tails, and so that's going to be equal to, so we just essentially the reciprocal of this, the probability of not a tail then a tail over the probability of two tails. And so that's just going to be 3/4 over 1/4. Okay, and that's of course going to be equal to 3/1. So you can also state that or as 3/2/1. And he's also should mention when you say this is 1, 2, 3. You should also include the word for here. Let's make sure it's clear. 3/2/1, or it can also be written as 3:1 against. Okay, so there are 3-to-1 odds against. So based in this case, it means it's 3 times as likely to get something else than to get two tails. Okay, let's do one more example. So number 2, let's talk about, say, the probability of rain today is, let's see, say it's 55%. Okay, that's a probability of rain. So you can also state that as a probability of rain is equal to 0.55. 55% is a decimal. Okay, so what that means, and so if our event E is it rains today, so then E complement is that it doesn't rain today. Okay, and so also one more thing we write this probably rain is 55%. Also we write that as 55 over 100. Okay, now also I want to reduce that. Okay, so I divide both by 5. I'll have 11 over 25. Okay, so going with that idea, then the probability of not raining, or I'll just say probability of no rain, probability of E complement, then is going to be, so if we subtract that, is going to be 45 over 100. Okay, now we get that as, remember, 100 minus 55 is 45. We can also write that then, if we divide both by 5, as 9 over 25. Oh, I'm sorry, not over 25. So I was about to make a mistake, because obviously this don't, 11 and 9 would not add to 25. This starts 11 over 20. Divided both by 5. 100 divided by 5 is 20. So not 9 over 25, but 9 over 20. There we go. Okay, because if you add these together, they must add to 1. Both these must add to 1. Okay. So once again, if we do odds in favor and odds against, odds in favor of rain, and also when you do odds, you also want to reduce it like this if you can. So write it as a decimal, write it out as either like a fraction. In this case, it was 2 decimal places, so it's 55 over 100. If it was like 0.555, it would be 555 over 1,000, for example. Okay, now odds in favor of rain is equal to the probability of E. We call that rain over the probability of E complement, no rain. And so that was going to be 11 over 20 divided by 9 over 20. And so that's going to be 11 over 9, or 11 to 9 in favor. Okay. And so as we can see, there's a better chance of it raining than not raining, which, as I said, makes sense because the probability of raining was greater than 50%. And then finally, if we do the odds against, which is simply the reciprocal of this, the probability of E complement, no rain, or the probability that it will rain. So we just want to use reciprocal, 9 over 20 divided by 11 over 20. And so that's going to be 9 over 11, or 9 to 11 against. And that's simply the odds against it raining. And once again, since this number is this odds against, this first number is smaller, that means there's a better chance of it raining than not raining. Okay, so let's kind of review what we've done so far. So basically, we talked about odds, which we've probably heard of before, and kind of looked at how it's related to probability. So basically, it's just a ratio of some event E, the probability to its complement. And then we saw how if you talk about odds in favor of something, it's probability of the event over its complement. Odds against are the probability of the complement over the event. And that just kind of tells you then, so basically also what this means, look at both odds in favor of this one again. Let's come back to this one. It means if I think about, so 11 plus 9 is 20. So I have essentially 11 times out of 20, it should rain. And then 9 times out of 20, it shouldn't rain. Think of it that way. Okay. So we learned then basically how to calculate the odds in favor and odds against some event. Thank you. Have a good day.